We're live from the Talk Radio studio. This is Talk TV, now joined live in the studio. He's been looking through some of the newspapers. We'll do some of those front pages in a moment by the political commentator, Connor Tomlinson. Morning, Connor.
Good morning, Chris.
Have we been face-to-face before?
No, weirdly enough, I think I first did your show last July, and we haven't actually done an in-person one. It's really refreshing.
Yeah, you're not usually allowed this close to me because of the fact that you have an obsession, clearly.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry about that.
It's fair. It's fair. You're only human. You're only human. That's why they're behind glass.
Yeah.
Do you know that? Behind
They're
you.
all chained to their desks.
They're all chained to their desks. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You know, don't work any harder as a result of being chained to their desks. How are you this morning, Connor
Good,
Tomlinson?
thank you. Very good. I just wanted to say congratulations on the wedding, by the way.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind of you to say. We just had a nice little mini-moon. If it weren't for luck and good fortune, I would still be in the Heathrow Arrivals Hall waiting for luggage. Do you know, even my mother is up this morning. My mother is up. Even she's messaged to say that she had the same problem with her cases when she came back a couple of weeks ago. They waited over 2 hours. Some passengers were threatening violence to the BA staff. They kept announcing that our luggage was arriving at the wrong carousel. So everyone was running around like headless chickens. I mean, it does give... Something's going wrong at the moment, and I don't know what it is, but it does give a terrible impression of the UK, that you sort of come with from some third world countries and they've got it together. And not that Greece is a third world country, but you expect the UK to be better, and we're still not.
No, there was something that, when we came back from Turkey a couple of weeks ago, same thing happened with EasyJet. All of the automated passport gates shut down. There were queues as long as back to the move-in... not escalate, you know, the moving
walkway
That's
thing.
the one, yeah. And there were only 2 people on the desks, and I was stuck in there for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And everything in this country at the moment doesn't seem to be working, does it? There's something in the air of where there's, like, all the trains, even when they are running, even when there's not a strike, the overhead cables at Paddington are down, it's killing me getting to work.
Yeah, there's a leaf on the line, or someone looked at someone the wrong way and they've gone on strike.
Yeah, there's no resilience, but there's also no ability to update the infrastructure. And I think it's in part... just because of not just the strikes, but there's so many people concentrated in one location. Everyone wants to live in London, for example, because all the opportunities are here. But when did we last upgrade any of the infrastructure? You know, we're living off...
in fairness, this is Terminal 5, though. I mean, it's the newest terminal. Actually, I don't think it's quite the newest, but, I mean, it is a new terminal in relation to everything else. But it's also the fact that you speak to people who are very nice, and they're like, oh, yeah, sorry, we don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, when is the luggage coming? We don't know. This is a really terrible service. Oh, I know, it's terrible. I mean, I really agree with you.
Yeah, well, you're providing it, so...
It's awful, isn't it? I said, but what do you want us to do? To know. So, that's what she said. She said, well, how much do you need your luggage? She said. I said, well, we do kind of quite need to just you go home. I said, well, and I knew my partner... with his new Rimowa case, he's got a Rimowa case, which is a ridiculous case. It's ridiculous. It is like, you know, one of those metal bells and whistles cases that, you know, will make tea for you. It's beautiful. I knew he would not leave that case.
No, he'd be livid,
no way. But also, I don't trust them to send it. So I said to her, my partner, he will not leave his case. So how long do you think we might be waiting? Oh, I don't know. So, well, that's terrible. I said, but, you know, might it be a few hours? She says, I can't 100%.
It's like a Little Britain sketch.
Yeah, it really was. She was so nice that it was actually really difficult to say, well, this is unacceptable, this is terrible. And the one time I got a bit stroppy, like I said, was when I said, well, you were expecting us, right? I mean, you did know that we were coming. You did know that we were landing. She said, yeah. She said, there's been lots of flights. Well, yes, you're an airport. There's been lots of flights. But, I mean, ours came after 2 hours, and we were relatively lucky, because there will be people who are still there now who have not had their cases and don't know what to do. And the other thing they were doing as well is they were sending people home, right? So they were saying, you know, if you've been waiting for 90 minutes, you should just go home. And then their luggage was coming.
Right. Okay.
And so, like, had we taken the advice to leave, our luggage would have still been going around the track, and I don't believe that they
would have ever made it to you.
They would have ever made it to me. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Morning to you, Ursula. Nice to have your company this morning. Shall we do some front pages before we delve into some of the newspapers? Daily Star we will start with. Amazing story. This is sad, but it might well be a mystery solved after 58 years. Have they found Keith? This is the Moors murderer's victim, Keith Bennett. Apparently they have found a skull, and this was, of course, the victim of the Moors murderers, whom they never knew the location of his body. I think, if I'm not mistaken, bless her, his poor mother died without ever knowing, actually, the location of his body, and they've still been looking for it, and they may well have found it, and that is what the Mirror is going for as well this morning. Moors murders dig for the lost victim. Police are searching Saddleworth Moor yesterday after a skull was found that could be Keith Bennett's, and writer Russell Edwards claiming he's discovered the remains of a child the same age as the 12-year-old victim of evil, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley.
I was going to say, can I just interject there? Because, I work for a little website called Lotus Eaters, right? And we've recently been covering some true crime content. And it's been quite difficult to do that because a lot of the time in modern culture, especially with, you know, the new Dharma series, for example, on Netflix, a lot of it seems to be covering predominantly the killers, their life, their crimes, but we rarely speak about the victims and their names. They don't get the same publicity. So it's good to see in all the tragedy that perhaps some peace is finally brought.
I really agree with that, and I love true crime.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed a little bit with true crime, but certainly when it comes to big terror attacks as well, I try and have a rule on this programme, any programme I present, that we don't mention the name of the person that did it, because the victims are the people that you should be talking about, not the person that did it, especially when they've done it for glory.
Yes.
OK, let's go to The Sun. Phil, £1 million ads axed. This is Philip Schofield. Apparently he's been dropped by WeBuyAnyCar.com. And this is, of course, after some of the memes that have been seen, which were written as WeJumpAnyQ.com. Apparently, the £1 million contract, they're shooting these new adverts next week without him, and he has been removed from their website. In fact, those were quite annoying adverts with him, but there you go. That's now what's happened as a result of Q Jump Gate, which I do still think is a fuss over nothing.
Well, they did try and double down on it. So if they would have gone and said, "Oh, okay, we made a mistake, and you know what, we're going to donate some of our proceeds to the newly inherited Prince's Trust now by Prince William," then they could have gotten away with it. But it's when you say, "Oh, we never would have jumped the queue, we never would have done that," and everyone goes, "Well, yeah, but these guys waited in it. They didn't get the same story. You know, David Beckham, Tilda Swinton, and they're higher profile celebs than you. If they wouldn't have doubled down, they would have gone, oh, okay, we didn't realise."
You're right. Their apology or non-apology was an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
And what they should have said was, I would never have used the term queue jump. What I would have said was, we did bypass the queue because we were filming a report, as people were allowed to, but because the report was coming out a little late after the Queen's funeral, and because of the depth of feeling, we now realise that was probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
We're really sorry. You know, really stupid idea to have done it. You know, we take full responsibility. But instead, you're right, there was no apology, really, other than, you know, we apologise if you are upset about it.
Yes.
And we didn't jump the queue or anything like that, and they doubled down. And that has made it worse, a worse story. But, and I'm telling you now, at ITV, they would have poured over that apology. If you notice, it was a voiceover. Yeah. Because they were so scared about it being misinterpreted, they actually did a voiceover so that it could be pre-recorded.
They've done some silly things, though, recently, because then the wheel of, and I understand there might have been some benevolent intent by a producer that came up with the idea, but the spinning the wheel on daytime TV, where you either get cash prize or pay your energy bills, it was something out of The Running Man, where you're putting poor people on telly to go, okay, run for your freedom, run for the energy bills.
Guy who won was like, oh my God, thank God I can cook. Oh, I could cook. Oh, so amazing.
It's a dystopian game show.
Absolutely terrible. It was a really, really bad idea. What they didn't realise was, and it is a really easy mistake to make in television, is that an idea that's good on paper, which actually it kind of was, you know, we'll pay your energy bills for a year. First it was only 4 months. so it's a bit tight. But I would say pay your energy bills for a year, firstly. But what they hadn't factored in was how it would actually sound when someone won, because for me the moment that it was terrible was when he said, "Oh my God, yes, heating, hurrah, oh my God, I can heat." It's like, oh God, that's terrible. That's
this is the situation
terrible
we're in as a country.
Yeah. All right, because there have been quizzes before where they say, well, we'll pay your mortgage for a year.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem as bad. People don't say, oh, thank God, I'm going to finally have somewhere to live.
Yeah.
It seems all right, but energy bills, a bit different. Okay, Daily Mail, have they found Keith at last? This is the same story that we've been discussing about the search on Saddleworth Moor. Meanwhile, we've got the Express somewhere here. Yes, we do. Banks warn of house price slump. This is the rocketing cost of mortgage payments, mass forced sales of homes. Banks fear. Of course, we saw a lot of mortgage companies pulling many of their products this week. I think a few of them have come back on the market now, though, some of these mortgage products. So that's what's going on there. Times this morning, Prince's plea for online safety after Molly ruling. This is the Prince of Wales increasing pressure on tech companies and the government to keep children safe online. We'll talk more about that story this morning, because it's made quite a few of the front pages this morning. The Eye, Tories rage at Truss. Half of 2019 voters have abandoned the party. Well, will they come back? We'll talk about that this morning as well. Telegraph, Kwarteng. This is Kwasi Kwarteng. I will bring spending under control, apparently promising to make a new commitment to bring public spending under control following a week of financial turmoil. And then we finish with The Guardian, a similar story on there that you will find on the front page of The Times. Molly Russell's father accused the world's biggest social media firms of monetising misery after an inquest ruled that harmful online content had contributed to her death. And he accused Meta, the owner of Facebook and Instagram, of guiding Molly on a demented trail of life-sucking content after the landmark ruling raised the regulatory pressure on social media companies. All right, when we come back, we will explore some of those stories in more depth, especially on some of those front pages, and lots more besides, all here live from the Talk Radio studio. This is Talk TV. Morning, how are you? It's Talk TV, it's Cristo with you until 7 o'clock, still joined in the studio by Connor Tomlinson, political commentator, and first time we've been in the same room together, and congratulations you made it.
Yep.
You made it, you were promoted to being in the room.
Not the last, I hope.
Not the last. Well, we'll see how you do over the next hour. Okay, let's talk about, we'll start with Truss, because that's the question we're asking this morning. Should she U-turn? She's saying she's not going to. She's saying she's going to plough on. What do you think?
I quite liked when the Times called her the human hand grenade yesterday, because in many respects, even though it seems like an insult, and I can't believe I'm saying this because Liz Truss is not exactly the most exciting candidate in the world, but we do need some kind of disruption to Treasury orthodoxy, right? I mean, Rishi Sunak seemed like the continuity candidate. He seemed like more money printing, more power devolved to the Bank of England, definitely on the road track to central bank digital currencies, which are fraught with all kinds of civil rights issues and whatnot. At least with the tax cuts, it might try to devolve more power to your pocketbook. And I understand they're trying to do something with the energy cap, but it's a risky gamble because you can only fend it off for 2 years. And if you've still got 1 foot in the grave with renewables, it's not going to work as a plan. Hopefully they bring the fracking and North Sea online.
But even that is pointless whilst the energy market is structured as it is. I mean, we could produce... I could call up the Treasury tomorrow and say, right, I've got a cheap, wonderful way of producing energy that is going to be online within 20 minutes. And it would still all end up on the open market because we have a privatised energy system. Now, I'm not against privatisation, but I think it has exposed a flaw in privatisation because even if it's our own energy, even if we produce it, even if it's our own fracking, even if it's our own North Sea gas, even if it's our own renewables, they all end up subject to worldwide markets because they're put on the open market.
I think most countries should have like a patriotic ownership clause, because let's look at nuclear power, for example, right? Even if we have our own nuclear power stations, we've got 22% of Hinkley and a 33% in Sizewell. I think they could be the other way around, but I know that's the numbers, owned by the Chinese state-owned nuclear firm. So even if we get energy independence, we're still reliant on our enemies. The same thing with Germany, right? Even if they say, oh, we've got all our energy needs met, well, you're still relying on Russia to outsource the production. So that's why I think, actually, to speak about an abundance that might enter the market in 2 years' time, which is their gamble as well. Come 2024, if the American regime turns around, if Biden, the Democrats decide to either lift their moratorium on fracking, unlikely, or Trump rides back over the hill into office and makes them energy independent again, that also might help us pay off the gamble. We might have an energy exporter. But again, it's a major, major gamble. My only thing is, what else are they really expected to do in terms of energy prices, other than work with the cap that they've got and try and save us all from collapsing? Because Germany's
we
staring
need
down the
something
barrel
like
of that.
you've suggested. The problem is we're trying to shut the stable door after the horses at the glue factory, because we are. The problem is that all of those private firms, I imagine, I don't know this for a fact because I'm no expert on it, but I would imagine, if you're a private firm that has spent all this money on this infrastructure and you're one of the big 7 energy companies and you've done all of this stuff, and then suddenly the government says, well, actually, now we're going to move the goalposts, and this privatised industry that you've invested in for decades, we're now going to say, right, actually, we're going to have... that's why Labour's plans. We're going to have this British energy company, or we're going to become energy independent. Well, they're all going to say, well, hang on, you can't just do that, because there are contractual obligations, and the market and the structure of the industry is thus, and that's why we've invested in that way. So it's going to cost you an incredible amount of money to say, well, we'll have to buy back these energy companies. It's so complicated, and the problem is the privatised energy market, as efficient as it has become, as opposed to how it was in the 70s, is set up for when there is energy abundance and when there is cheap worldwide energy. What it was never set up for, and people who are paid far more money than us should have envisaged this, is when there is a lack of energy or when prices go through the roof and are subject to those market conditions. And it's not fair on us. We shouldn't have even Thatcher, that all of those people years ago should have known that something like this might have happened at some point.
Yeah, well, it's funny that Kwasi Kwarteng said something in an interview a little while ago, and he said, because he studied undergraduate history and classics at Cambridge, and he said the most successful politicians of the 20th century were Thatcher and Blair, but they were profoundly ahistorical, because they lurched from crisis to crisis to crisis in many respects. They didn't think what would really come after them, and they didn't think what they had to inherit before to keep the continuity of. They weren't sort of like a stitch in the national tapestry. They were new people starting from year zero. And we've kind of been left to pick up the pieces of that. It's like Gordon Brown, for example, never building the nuclear power plants, and then David Cameron saying, oh, we will, and then never building them. And they just keep kicking the can down the road. Because if they would have done that 10 years ago when they said, oh, it's 10 years too long to build, we would have had a massive amount of abundance by now.
But there's no point in having that unless we sort out how the energy ends up going to market. Because, again, we could have 10 nuclear power plants. We could have so many renewables that they're coming out of our ears. We could harness the battery power for renewables and make them absolutely perfect to be used, because at the moment we don't have the battery power for renewables as well to run the grid on a constant. All of those things are pointless whilst the energy that we produce. It's why renewables are as expensive as gas at the moment, because it all ends up on the open market. And unless someone comes up with a solution that means that those energy companies that are in private hands are satisfied, yet we also end up with energy for the UK that is at a lower rate, then, for me it would be somehow, we do come up with some way of producing contracts where we say to people, right, you can have the North Sea gas, but X amount gets sold to us at this price, and the rest could go on the open market. But again, I'm not sure how that would work, or whether it would work well or not, but we really do have a problem. at the moment. What about these tax cuts? Should she U-turn on those? Everyone's saying that they're absolutely awful. It's the worst thing in the world. She's crashed the pound. What do you say?
I think she needs to adjust the lower rate to do a bit more, and I have no problem with people that earn a lot of money in a legitimate way having a proper tax cut, especially because if you're in the private sector like I am, that means you can go to your boss and hopefully negotiate for a bit of a better salary to fight inflation because he's happy with more money in his pocket. But the optics of the banker stuff doesn't look good. I'm just going to say it. The optics of the banker stuff looks really bad.
It doesn't look good without the lower cut.
Yes.
And to me, that seems like such a schoolboy error that they didn't say, right, we'll do it at both ends.
Yeah.
We'll say we'll give you a higher cut from 45 to 40. We'll get rid of the cap and bankers' bonuses, but
we'll raise the threshold.
Yes,
that would have been a lot smarter.
And you wouldn't have even had to have raised the threshold for everyone. You could have said, again, I would have staggered it. You earn £20,000, you don't pay tax. You earn £25,000, you pay it on 21. You earn 30, you pay it on 23. You earn 35. Do you see what I mean? And then that would have balanced out, and or the other way around. I don't know, but do you know what I mean? You'd have staggered it somehow so that therefore whatever you earn and the lowest earners are taken out of tax altogether. And it seems like such an error that they didn't do that. Maybe there is logic to why they didn't do that, or maybe they're saving it up their sleeve for nearer the election, but it is terrible optics.
Well, I think they're going to try and make up some of that bad press with the party conference speeches, because obviously that kicks off tomorrow. If you can even get there because of the rail strikes, that's going to be a blooming nightmare. And even get home. I mean, I've got to go down and cover it, and I've just had to book a last-minute coach back, even though I had train tickets pre-booked. So, wonderful stuff.
Well, I got one of those yesterday.
Right.
A coach. Unfortunately, it was from the plane that landed to the terminal, but it was nearly the length of a coach journey, and it did feel like that. Do you know what? Coaches are not bad.
No, they're all right. They're air conditioned and kind of comfy. It's just the
where is the conference?
Birmingham.
Oh God.
Yeah. Well, so last year was in Manchester.
Imagine the coaches out of Birmingham are more busy than the coaches in. That's a bad thing to say. Sorry, Birmingham.
You're going to get a lot of very angry callers, I'm sure. What they're doing is they're trying to position it outside of London to sort of pander to the Red Wall, but the Red Wall is hemorrhaging votes because you haven't done anything for them. They lent you their votes because most of them were Brexiteers. Then you put them under house arrest for 2 years. Then you made everything incredibly unaffordable, and then you've now retreated into the Westminster bubble and haven't addressed the concerns of Brexit voters when, for example, they're saying, do you think there's a problem of immigration? And Liz Truss not only ruled out an immigration moratorium or a cap, she went, oh, I'm going to raise it for seasonal fruit pickers. And it's like, okay, well, do you not think there are pressures on housing right now, especially with the interest rates going up as well? Do you not think, oh, build more houses? That's not a solution if the demand's being artificially inflated. Do you not think there's competition for jobs?
I thought that the point of Brexit, though, was precisely for that they could say, OK, we need fruit pickers, for instance, which we didn't have many of this summer. So rather than saying, right, we need just labour from the EU, we specifically need this industry to be filled, so therefore that's what we're going to do. I mean, I thought that if I was a Brexit voter, which many people know I wasn't, but if I was, that would be precisely what I'd want. I'd want someone to say, well, actually, we are going to allow people in because it's a specific need we have.
If it's targeted, that's fine, but not on top of the record amount of visas, which were over 1 million last year, and then many people still not dealt with crossing the channel.
In fairness, that's last year.
But that's still the plan. She's literally said we're going to raise immigration overall. So that's more seasonal fruit pickers on top of a mass amount of people coming in. We don't have the infrastructure for. We don't necessarily have the housing.
I agree with. I mean, it is the immigration debate is infrastructure versus people. I mean, that's what it ends up, unfortunately, being, because if we don't have the infrastructure for it, we don't have the infrastructure for it, and we can quote to the Red Wall, Blue Wall, whatever colour it is this week, all sorts of stats saying, well, look, immigration gives us billions of pounds in tax benefits. But if there is no, if you can't get a doctor's appointment and none of that money was used to actually improve the infrastructure, then it's not going to be much comfort to those people. It's an interesting one because I'm not sure how you solve it if we need specific industries filled. Maybe that's something we'll explore a little bit more in the next hour. We're also going to talk a little bit more over the course of the next hour about more of the issues around these tax rises, but also this horrific story of Molly, 14-year-old, who took her own life back in 2017, and online safety is very much back in the news. So we'll talk about that and what online companies need to be doing. So all of that is coming up live right here. It's Talk TV. How are you this morning? Coming up at about 6:40 this morning, so in about 40 minutes' time. We are doing them at, aren't we? It's going to be Roger Giewolb is going to be talking to us. We'll do him at 6:40 this morning, and he's going to be talking to us about some of the economic issues that we are facing. We've also got Connor Tomlinson with us, a political commentator who's been looking through some of the newspapers, just having a very interesting conversation off air about how we solve the problems of the labour market, why we have these issues of jobs not being done, of infrastructure not working, how we solve those problems if there are perhaps British people that don't want to do those jobs, but also how we solve those problems by... that's why I think actually Liz Truss is not bad by saying, well, look, actually, we need fruit pickers. Let's go abroad to get those fruit pickers because we can't get them here.
If it's targeted, fine. If it's on top of the existing unsustainable amount of people who are coming in and need housing, need NHS, etc., on arrival, plus the X amount of channel migrants...
But you're talking about asylum.
No, I'm not. I'm saying legal immigration, of course, if people turn up, they need housing, they need... So if the housing... Let's put this perspective, right? If there are 300,000 to 400,000 people net intake every year, right? If only 200,000 houses are being built, we're literally just only building houses for the people that are arriving.
I understand that. The infrastructure is not catching up with the number of people who are coming here. But then we're getting into the realms of how the kinds of trade deals that we negotiate, because a lot of the trade deals that we end up negotiating have an element of, well, look, our workers can go and work in India or, as it was, Europe. Those workers can come and work here as well. And a lot of politicians look at the net benefit when it comes to numbers, when it comes to those things. And the thing is, overwhelmingly, immigration does, on paper, give us massive economic benefits.
GDP, GDP per capita, not necessarily GDP per capita or median household income.
Absolutely, but I don't think they look at that. I think they just say, "Well, look, amazing." You know, it happened during the Brexit debate. I was one of those people that used to quote it, say, "Well, look, immigration's given us a net benefit of like £6 billion in tax." But to someone, as I just said before the news, who's sitting there saying, "Well, look, I can't get a doctor's appointment," no one's going to say, "Yeah, it's not going to be much as reassurance." When I say, "Well, look, yeah, but £6 billion's got into the economy," they're going to say, "Yeah, but I can't get a doctor's appointment." So the problem is that then we're getting into the realms of as I said, the trade deals that we're doing. And a lot of trade deals are going to involve us saying, well, look, you can come here. And we can go there.
So there are 2 points I want to make. That the first thing is the trade deals are also tied up with the energy as well. So I'm sure you know that they're trying to enter us into the TPP.
Yes. The
TPP has an investor state disclosure clause, which basically means companies can sue countries. And so if you don't buy the goods that you're obligated to buy, you're on the hook as taxpayers for a massive lawsuit. Those include oil. So as we're staring down the barrel of net zero, we're getting ourselves voluntarily into lawsuits like Canada and the US have. And then the other one is, we can talk about economics all day and night. Of course we have to, because we're in a cost of living crisis. But there's also cultural incompatibilities that can't be overlooked. And if you're a resident of Leicester and you open your door and you're seeing a bunch of people riot over religious tensions which you have no part in, you're not going to be in favour of immigration no matter how many arguments are going to be made in terms of GDP. And the fact that no one is willing to even talk about this in Tory or Labour side means that there's a massive floating voter constituency that feel disaffected by both. And people wonder why, for example, in Sweden or Italy, the so-called far-right candidates are getting a rise because people feel disenfranchised. That's why people are checking out the Tory party in massive numbers, and Labour has a lead, but only by default.
I completely agree with that, and I completely agree that we have for too long allowed different cultures to settle here in the UK. And ultimately, what's frustrating is that it's come from a really good place, because we are a really lovely country, and we want people to feel like they are really welcome here and that they are able to be themselves here and have their own culture here. But I come from Greek heritage, but I'm British. I'm Greek, but if you ask me what I am, I'm British. Why? Because I live in Britain.
Yeah.
And although my dad is Greek, my dad would probably say he's Greek-British, because you're British as well as being Greek. You know, he hasn't come here, my family hasn't come here and decided to stay speaking Greek and not integrating in any way, shape or form, because you can't. That's just not what you do. And I think that there has been an issue with that, and I think that and again, you know, one of the things that I think that British people don't mind at all is if there are different cultures that come here, but they feel a part of it, and that they're involved in it. You know, I have friends that come round to my family for Greek Easter all the time, because like, you know, because that's part of it. Yeah. But I think that there has been too much, I think you're absolutely right, of communities that have remained in their cultural bubble from where that perhaps they came from without integrating into the UK, and that's made people who live in the UK saying, well, hang on, we're not a part of that at all. No,
it's like a satellite state. The world on my doorstep doesn't feel like where I used to grow up, and there's nothing stopping plenty of cultures from integrating. I mean, look at British Sikhs, for example. Absolute success story. They build gurdwaras, they're pretty much beautiful buildings, they do lots of charity work, they have open kitchens, I've eaten in them, they're really nice people, and they're incredibly patriotic. But when you have, you know, Indian Hindus and Pakistani Muslims bringing over a historical, localised tension to the country and warring in the street rather than integrating and reaping the benefits of Britain, of our culture, the thing that made us so prosperous and tolerant, that can't be left to stand. That's not what.
But also, what it does is, ironically, the Muslims and Hindus who do integrate. Yeah. It does them a disservice,
of course,
because then people say, "Well, that no one integrates," and it is a real shame. And that's why I think all those years that we spent, and again, it comes from a good place. What's frustrating is that we do it because we're actually quite a nice nation. Yeah. But all those years that we spent, you know, have you ever get anything from your council? If you want this in a different language, you know, if you get a leaflet, if you want this in 5 different languages, you know, just get in touch with us. Well, actually, no, I don't know whether we should be doing that.
No, well, Liz Truss has removed, and even though it wasn't really enforced anyway, let's be honest, but removed the requirement to speak English to immigrate. No, I don't think, for example, we should have the Whitechapel sign for the tube in another language. It doesn't matter whether or not you're celebrating someone's heritage. With an English-speaking nation, you speak English. You do as the Romans do. Welcome to the country, please, but you have to participate in our customs.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. My partner is getting his British citizenship, and he's had to do an English test. He's had to do all of those things. He's had to do a quiz on the history of the UK. No, but actually, but we joke about it. We're laughing a bit about it, but I'm also saying to him, but this is all good. So you should be able to. Yeah, well, fine. We'll give you some time. You can come here, and you got to, you know, you can have some time to learn it. But the whole point is, you come here in order to learn it, to become a part of British culture. Yeah,
it demonstrates an enthusiasm for picking our country specifically. You're not just here to reap the economic benefits and then go if the country falls into trouble. No, you're saying I'm English through thick or thin. It's like a marriage. You stick through it through good times and the bad.
And that is why, and we have got lots and lots of people that have done that, which is why we have, for instance, in the NHS, I mean, our NHS would fall apart if it wasn't for immigration, but of course all those people who work there have had to learn English, have had to learn how to integrate, have had to learn how to do it properly, because otherwise we would be up the proverbial creek. It's the people that haven't done that that's the problem. And I think sometimes as well, because that's so frustrating, those voices get amplified as well, and those issues get amplified massively, and it's a real shame. OK, 0344 499 1000 if you want to join the conversation on that. Dallas says, Cristo, you're the only person other than my mother that I've heard using the phrase no more use than ornament. I use the phrase neither use nor ornament, but I think it's the same. On a serious note, I'd ban smartphones for all under 18s except under parental or teacher supervision. Give them library cards and a basic phone. This is, of course, off the back of Dallas, you're messaging us this one, Cristo_radio, if you want to message me. Prince of Wales now stepping in, saying, off the back of what this coroner has said, that the content that a teenager read on Instagram and Pinterest contributed to her death. This is Molly Russell, took her own life in November 2017 after viewing thousands of posts about suicide, self-harm and depression. Her father, Ian, yesterday described the material as a demented trail of life-sucking content, and now Prince William said last night no parent should ever have to endure what Ian Russell and his family have been through. They've been incredibly brave. Online safety for our children and young people needs to be a prerequisite, not an afterthought. What do you say, Connor?
So there's a few issues here. The online safety / harms bill is a total mess. Now, the parts about protecting children from things like pornography or awful algorithms which have no transparency are noble. The minefield is about legal but harmful speech, for example. But we know that these Silicon Valley platforms are profiting off of our misery. So Meta, parent company of Facebook and Instagram, released their internal report came out, and the top of the report said, this is absolutely detrimental for teenage girls, specifically mental health, because they're susceptible to social pressures. And at the bottom of the report, and it said, here's how these behavioural insights can be used to target to an even younger demographic. So the top of the report was, we're evil, and we're bringing down women's self-esteem to suicidal levels. And the bottom said, and here's how we can use that to make more money. And then you see TikTok, which is just genuinely Chinese spyware. If anyone listening has your kids on TikTok, get rid of it immediately. Those feed algorithms to girls that are giving them, like, tics, or there's this new trend. Have you heard of spoonies? So it was an online blog post about 20 years ago, and it was this analogy for how people with disabilities or illnesses have a limited number of spoons to use compared to everyone else. It's just an analogy for energy. But now, women are calling themselves spoonies and making photos of themselves with self-diagnosed illnesses, and because they're getting loads of likes, other girls are getting hypochondria and believing they're either terminally ill or that doctors won't listen to them when they've got these conditions, and so they're all psychosomatic. And so you've got this mass epidemic of women self-diagnosing themselves with mental conditions for likes on the internet. That's not good for your self-esteem at all. It's terrible.
I just thought TikTok was about, doing silly dances.
No. The reason is the Chinese have banned it in their own country because they said it's demoralising, but they're promoting to us.
Do you know what? When we come back, we'll talk more about this because it is quite fascinating. But also, I think we're going to have to talk as well about to what extent parents should be policing their children doing this, because I am telling you right now, if I had a child, there is no way on God's green earth they would be on any of these sites. No. And I do think that we need to start not removing the responsibility from the parents and indeed the resilience of the kids themselves. But we'll come back and we'll talk about that right here, live from the Talk Radio studio. This is Talk TV. Morning. We're just taking a look at the newspapers this morning here on Talk TV. We're talking about this really sad story. Social media companies accused of monetising misery. TikTok, of course, one of them, but they're continuing to deny allegations of any data mishandling. However, Molly Russell, this 14-year-old girl who died back in 2017 after viewing large amounts of content related to suicide, depression and self-harm. Her father accusing the world's biggest companies in social media of monetising misery, accusing Meta, the owner of Facebook and Instagram, of guiding Molly on a demented trail of life-sucking content. The inquest heard yesterday that Molly had viewed large amounts of content related to suicide, depression, self-harm and anxiety on Instagram and Pinterest. And her father urged Meta's founder, Mark Zuckerberg, to listen to the people who use his platform, listen to the conclusions the coroner gave, and do something about it. Executives from Pinterest and Meta who gave evidence before the senior coroner during the 2-week hearing both apologised for what their platforms showed her. There's a balance here, isn't there? Because my worry that I have, and this is something I'm really passionate about, clearly there was horrifically inappropriate content being shown to this poor girl, without a doubt. And if you are vulnerable to start with and you read all of that stuff, you're gonna end up in this cycle of misery and self-loathing. However, firstly, why was someone at the age of 14 able to have such an amount of access to these sorts of platforms, number one? And secondly, why aren't we doing more to equip our children to be able to switch off from this sort of content. And I don't mean physically switch the devices off. I mean having a level of resilience about some of this content, because I do worry about younger people and the fact that we have a society that is so obsessed with safety, and a society that is so obsessed with not putting any kind of risk in people's path, that as soon as they then encounter something that is contrary to that, it really affects them. And you know, this sort of idea that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger seems to have been abandoned in society. I'm not blaming her for this. Clearly, this is an absolutely tragic case. But perhaps if this poor girl was not only not viewing this stuff, but was also equipped with the tools to say, well, this is a load of rubbish, and I shouldn't be reading this, or it's not something I'm going to clip on, or I'm not going to believe it, or I'm not going to be affected by this, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. Yeah,
it's a failure. I'm not going to speak to this particular case in terms of what the parents did or didn't do, because we can't know, but it's a failure on many instances of parents for using things as a digital babysitter that gets kids hooked on these devices. I mean, you see it in restaurants all the time with babies with tablets now. You're comforted by a screen from cradle to grave. It's not healthy. It's not something that we've had throughout all of human evolution. Obviously, you're going to have some behavioural impacts, specifically when your dopamine receptors go sky high from flashing lights. Or app designers. Did you know they make apps, the little bubbles, shiny and multicoloured to resemble ripe fruit, to lock into our evolutionary detection mechanism, so it gets us hooked on it. And then schools, you've rightly raised that kids aren't emotionally resilient. They've done this thing, and it's crept over from America, but you see it in all of the like corporate briefings from like UN and things like that, or teachers' resources, where it's like social emotional learning. What that used to be incorporated into PSHE, and it used to be things like mindfulness or critical thinking. Now, they've abandoned that because over in America, for example, they've said, controlling your emotions is whiteness, it's racist, you can't keep people to do that. And instead, you've mollycoddled people and affirmed them and said, you're entirely valid, you don't need to change. Well, do you know what you shouldn't tell a really depressed teenager? It's not you, it's the world. Well, if you think, I'm entirely okay, but still there's something wrong in my life, it must be the whole world. I can't tackle the whole world at once.
I agree. There's an amazing book on this. I'm obsessed with it. I talk about it all the time, and it's called The Coddling of the American Mind. And
yes, Jonathan Haidt.
Yes, brilliant book. Yes. And it's exactly about that, and it's about how, for anyone who doesn't know, it's exactly about how, with good intentions again, we are trying to shield absolutely everyone, especially younger people, especially those people in educational establishment, from anything that might challenge them. And we've started to abuse the word safe, actually, and about safety and feeling unsafe. And it's not just there, it's everywhere. I'm absolutely obsessed. I talk about it all the time on this programme, about how, you can't get on an escalator now without 15 signs telling you, don't throw yourself down it, and hold onto the rail, and do all of these sorts of things, because, you might be moronic enough to want to throw yourself down it. We are obsessed with creating a society at the moment. We're doing it on our roads, where the hierarchy of responsibility is now that if you are a pedestrian, it's not your responsibility to keep yourself safe by looking both ways. It's the car driver's responsibility not to hit you. And so we're obsessed with removing risk from every situation, and that's great on paper, but what we're actually doing is we're not equipping people for any kind of controversy or any kind of challenge in their lives. And then we wonder why we've got a mental health epidemic when people, when something goes wrong in their lives, or people have challenges in their lives, or genuine issues around mental health, they completely fall apart.
They have no emotional immune system.
No emotional immune system. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's the case with this at all.
No.
Clearly, this was an absolutely horrific situation, but I would love, and I'd love to be able to believe that young people were equipped enough that if they saw something online that will challenge their self and challenge their identity and challenge their sense of self and their ego and anything like that, that they don't collapse and fall apart. And I'm worried that we're creating a generation of people that do.
Well, it's the same thing. You can't fix the world, you can only take in personal responsibility. So I'll use an analogy, for example. When my girlfriend goes out in the evening with her mates, I always say, there are lots of creepy guys about, so keep your wits about you, right? It's not her fault there are creepy guys around, but
Absolutely.
you can't change the fact there are creepy guys around, so you just have to remain vigilant. So we apply this same principle to the social media companies, all right? Parents, these social media companies, you're right, they're not removing their content. Twitter had multiple instances of child abuse filmed, brought to them by the people that were in those videos years on, and didn't take them down because they said they didn't violate community guidelines. You have Facebook and Meta who have this content up, and they don't have the time to take that down, but they do have the time to hand over to the FBI a bunch of conservative-leaning messages from US users, none of which were actioned on, none of which had any illegal content, but they handed all that over that subpoena. So they can do that for political reasons, but not to safeguard your kids, all right? Yeah, totally. They're falling down on the job. But rather than wait for legislation to catch up with that, you've just got to stop your kids using them. You've got to be the mean parent, but you aren't their best friend. You're their parent. You're keeping them safe. And do, as my boss does, be a Luddite. Take the phones away from your kids. You'll notice their behaviour improves. You notice they are more concerned with the immediate relationships they have in their household than bringing whatever school bullies are home online or talking to whoever, God knows whoever, halfway around the world. You will notice their behaviour improve, their self-esteem improve, and they're not susceptible to capture by this sort of stuff.
Carl has sent us a tweet. Can you say the name of that book again, please, as I missed it? It's called The Coddling of the American Mind, and it's about exactly what we've been discussing. But I would take it further and say that it's not just about the younger people, and it talks a lot about educational establishments actually, and about how the number of speakers who have been cancelled in American establishments, which could very easily be applied here because they will challenge the way in which people think, but how that has now been equated with the word safety, and how I don't feel safe. And, I hate the term safe space. I'm now in a safe space. Well, that implies that any other space outside it is unsafe. You're not unsafe to hear something that you might not like. Hearing something you don't like does not make you unsafe.
To use a biblical analogy, everyone wants to get back to the Garden of Eden because it's safe and beautiful. But do you know what you had to be to stay in the Garden of Eden? Ignorant.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be there.
The brilliant thing at the start of this book, and if you've read it, you'll know it, and it is so true, is the peanut analogy. It's the peanut...
which I have.
Peanut allergy. Yeah. A peanut analogy and the peanut allergy. And that is the fact that... it's an analogy because it works actually with everything, because what we are doing is we are becoming self-fulfilling. And so a lot of nurseries, a lot of institutions, a lot of places now where you will send young people will simply ban peanuts. Yeah. They won't ask whether anyone has a peanut allergy before banning peanuts. They just ban them. And the number of people with peanut allergies has skyrocketed because no one's being exposed to peanuts. So what it's becoming is self-fulfilling, in as much as now that because more and more people have got these peanut allergies, they need to ban more and more peanuts. So soon, everyone's going to have peanut allergies, and you're never going to be able to have peanuts. Whereas actually, if we had asked people if they had peanut allergies rather than just banning them, then not as many people would have these allergies. Now, if you take that and put that in a society, I can't stand the fact now that what we are doing is we are making people rely on the state telling them what is safe and what isn't safe. Oh, I crossed the road here, and I got run over. It's the state's fault. Yeah. Because there wasn't a sign telling me that I should look both ways and keep myself safe. I got on this escalator and there was only one sign telling me to hold on, and I fell down. And so and what we are doing is we are creating more and more stupid people. Yeah. Because the more that we are pandering to stupid people, the more we're making them stupid. So it's getting worse.
It's idiocracy. Well, it's actually frustrating as well.
That is the word.
Well, it's frustrating as well with people like me who does actually have a peanut allergy, who goes into a restaurant, and now because of these policies that everyone's got paranoid, I can't take the risk for myself. So I sit down and I go, I want a dessert or something, and they'll go, oh, that might contain traces. We can't serve that to you. And it's like, well, does it have any actual nuts in it? No. But it was made in a factory where 6 miles away someone might have handled something on their lunch break. And it's like, well, I think I'll be fine, I won't drop dead. But I'm not allowed to take that risk for myself because I'm being infantilized by safety culture. It's comparable in many respects to successful ethnic minorities in the country that turn around and go, wait, I'm oppressed. Sorry, I might have been rude to by an individual racist once, but the whole society isn't bearing down on me. But you're discouraging me from even taking that chance because you're saying I'll never succeed. We've got to get out of this mindset of it is the entire fault of society that things are going wrong, and picking up after us.
But it's also not just an ideological thing, because there is there's political ideology here, and as much as about the power of the individual, which I believe in. I believe the state plays a part, but I believe that the individual has a big part. But also, it is about not making it worse for ourselves, and we are making it worse for ourselves. And also, if you factor in as well, going back to devices, the other element of devices, which is really interesting, and this is another thing I'm obsessed about, and if you've listened to me talk about this before, I'm sorry, because I talk about it a lot, but one of the stories that has shocked me the most over the last few years is digital dementia, which is, of course, if you're not familiar with it, when you are of a certain age, when you are a young person, so, how old are you again?
23.
You're 23, right, okay, well, I am...
21.
Not quite. Yes, I'm 29. No, I'm not quite double your age, but I'm not far off. And I feel like I'm extremely lucky because I think I'm the tail end of before certainly smartphone devices went crazy. I had a mobile when I was younger than you, but it was not a smartphone. But most definitely what we are doing with young people now, and it is actually a scientifically proven, is that in my generation, when I was younger, I would walk somewhere, I'd walk to a new friend's house, and I'd have to get home, and that landmark, and I turned left here, and, hang on, have I gone the right way? I'll get my change in a shop, and I've got to count here, and I have to problem solve. Whereas the young generation now, they don't have to do any of those things because it's all on their phone. Directions, adding up, multiplication, problem solving, anything you need to find out. I don't need to go to a book. I don't need to look it up. I don't need to alphabetically find it in an encyclopedia because I can just look at it on my phone. What that's doing is it's actually stopping younger people developing the neural pathways that allows you to problem solve. Now, I talk about the issues that I had at BA yesterday with the baggage handling, and I say to the person there, the young person there, what's going on? I don't know. Well, the reason I believe that we are raising a generation of really stupid people is because, unfortunately, they've never had to critically think, and they've never had to solve a problem because the problems have all been solved for them on that little device.
Yeah, we've outsourced our independence to our apps.
But it's actually medical. Now, it's those neural pathway issues, it's called digital dementia, because those are the pathways you lose when you have dementia as an older person. But what's happening is younger people aren't even developing them.
Yeah, they've got arrested development. And the thing that I've noticed as well, and when I went to school, I didn't have a smartphone, right? But the difference between people a few years younger than me who entered school with a smartphone and when they leave school they still have their smartphone on, and so the school environment is inescapable. They're constantly locked in this paradigm of climbing the social ladder, right? You can never switch off. And so you've got that stunted, dopamine-addicted attention span, so you can't sit down and read a book. You're constantly aware of how people perceive you, of how you've got to do things performatively, you've got to be socially.
Easy.
Yep.
But even... Okay, I'm not a younger person who's impressionable in that way, but even on holiday, myself and my partner, we are both having to let's put our phones down. And I'm reaching for it because you're right about the dopamine. And, this is, we are big enough and ugly enough to not do it, but you get absolutely drawn in to the addiction of it all. And that's not going to change. What you are absolutely right on, Connor, is it's not going to change.
Yeah.
If you are a person raising children, if you are a person yourself who's listening to this thinking, well, one day they'll clamp down on the social media networks and it'll all change. We are decades off that happening, if at all. You have to take action for yourself and your children now, because otherwise you will end up going down this road, and at some point people with ill intent will try and get to you and your children, or you will end up relying on these methods of problem solving or whatever else, and you're going to end up in a bad situation. Society's going to end up in a bad situation.
If you're worried about all this left-wing politics as well, the worst places for these online echo chambers to fester are on social media. So if you don't want your kids drawn into insane ideologies that you see people gluing them hands in the street on the M25, or as Abigail Schreier's written about, impressionable young, largely autistic girls who might also be gay and just struggling with their identity, falling prey to predatory people who are in the trans activist lobby, for example, if you don't want your kids to become online radicals or do silly things to their bodies, then take social media away while their brains are still developing. It's not good for them.
Or my suggestion is that, you know, you're allowed it, but you're out of half an hour supervised. You know, you need to be able to know how to use social media. You need to know how to use a smartphone. You need to be able to know how to do those things. But you have it for a set amount of time, and then it is taken from you.
You need digital literacy, but I don't think anyone under the age of 16 to 18, let's find a threshold in there for maturity, should have a public profile. I don't think you should be a Greta Thunberg trying to be an activist before you've read anything, for example. You should not have a participation in the public discourse or speaking to strangers from around the world before you're an adult. And I think that is just sensible parenting, and it won't win you favours when their best mate has TikTok, why can't I have TikTok?
Yeah.
But your job as a parent
strong.
is not to be loved in the moment, it's to be loved in the future.
Stephen says the job of the parents is to soften the blow of the harshness of the world, not to remove it. In my days, computers were safe, but grown up parents need to realise that they are not. Which is why it's got to be supervised, Stephen, and there've got to be real parameters as to what you do. Because again, you don't want to remove any of that harshness. In a weird way, where I slightly disagree with you, is you kind of want your children supervised to see some of that rubbish. Because as a parent, what I want is them to see it and me say, right, this is what you need to ignore, and this is why it's wrong, and this is why it's ridiculous, and if someone shows this to you at school, which they might do, this is why it's terrible, and this is how social media works, and this is going to be your profile, but I'm going to have access to it, and all of this stuff. That, to me, is how you get the balance right. I'm not sure I would say you can't have any of it, because they'll get it somewhere else. They'll get it from their friend at school whose parents aren't.
Sure, but I'd inoculate them with conversation rather than, and my girlfriend said about this, for example, when she was younger, her mum would check her texts and things like that, and all it meant is that she had a lot of distrust between her and her mum, and she was afraid, even if she wasn't doing anything wrong, of someone snooping through her private possessions. So you don't want to create that distrust either. It's a really difficult game to navigate. I sympathise, but I just come down the side of being a digital Luddite and going, sorry, not till you've done your GCSEs. You know?
Nicola says, is the safety culture not partly the fault of insurance companies? If signs aren't displayed by the escalator and someone hurts themselves and sues, the insurance company might not pay out. Also, it's our litigiousness, Nicola, as well. It's this obsession with, you know, trying to blame other people. You know, I fell over. It can't possibly be that I tripped. There has to be someone else to blame that I've got to sue.
It's that apocryphal story from Red Bull, isn't it, where they've changed the, you know, they said Red Bull gives you wings, now they had extra eyes and things like that. There's the apocryphal story of some guy drank a can of Red Bull, jumped off somewhere high and broke something and said, oh, I couldn't fly, so it's false advertising. It's that kind of stuff. If the legal framework wasn't there, then he wouldn't have been able to sue for that in the first place.
It drives me mad, because I just worry about, you know, imagine when you and I have shuffled off this mortal coil in 100 years' time, what kind of society we're going to have, where, you know, and it's the idea as well. Do you know the other thing that irritates me? I could talk about this for hours. It's the, you know, the trigger warnings about things. I was watching something the other day. It was the Steptoe & Son movie that was on late.
Oh, my God,
And it actually said in the break, and we just want to warn viewers that there are references in the break to Queen Elizabeth, references in this movie to Queen Elizabeth II. Because I might see a reference to the Queen in Steptoe & Son, and the Queen has died, and therefore I'm going to have some sort of meltdown that the Queen has died. And it's like this, just this constant, fine, if you're epileptic, fine, flashing lights that might bring on a fit, tell me about that in the break. But something that I might hear that might be a bit harsh, I'm sorry, I've got to hear harsh things, otherwise I'm never going to be able to cope.
Yeah, your emotional weakness is not a pre-existing condition. They did the same thing for Peter Pan, for example, and said, oh, these outdated depictions of Native American culture might cause offence. Viewer discretion is advised. It's like, okay, one, it was done in the, 1960s. Two, it's not that offensive. And three, so what? Who cares?
We're not stupid.
Yeah.
But the problem is, as well, you end up almost radicalised, because I now say, oh, well, phew, at least put a warning so we don't lose it.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so For instance, I love A Lower Low, you know, that ridiculous sitcom from the 80s, and there's warnings
Good
on
morning.
that now. Yeah. But there's warnings on that now.
Oh, for God's sake.
Because of the fact that it's offensive to Germans, it's offensive... Well, in fairness, it's offensive to every nationality.
Good. English culture.
The French are stupid, the Germans are stupid, everyone in it, the Italians are stupid, everyone in it is stupid.
Yeah.
But they put a warning on it now, and I'm actually... I sort of find myself going, oh, phew.
That's
because
Stockholm
without the
syndrome.
warning, we wouldn't be allowed to watch it at all. So please put the warning on. Whereas actually, what I really want is no warning.
Yeah, but that's negotiating with the emotional terrorists. That's saying, oh, at least you can call me stupid, but just don't take away the things I love. I'm radicalised to the point of where no, I actually prefer content if you are crying about it. Like at this point, if you endorse it, it's like you look at the critics rating on Rotten Tomato, right? Things like Marvel's She-Hulk, and it's glowing, certified fresh, the audience rating rock bottom. So I think any time the establishment critics say something's good, that's like a badge of dishonour. So it's clearly, oh, something must have offended you, something must have upset you, something must not be parroting the mainstream narrative. I'll watch it.
But does that not mean yes? Exactly. So it could go the other way around now.
Yeah.
Actually, these warnings can become a badge of honour.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe we want to watch them more. So we should keep the warnings. But because then we are at least being anarchists because we're keeping the warnings because it's going to make us watch them rather than be offended.
I think we're dealing with the paradigm we're set, but it's also when they put the warnings on it, it's not always for the most sensible reasons. It might be really quality content, but the fact that warnings there at all is a symptom of excessive safety culture.
It is excessive safety culture, and the word safety is being abused now.
Yeah, if you don't encounter at least a little bit of mud, you'll never build up a tolerance to the germs.
Absolutely, and then we wonder why we have a mental health crisis. Yeah. You know, it's no coincidence that at a time when we have never worried about safety more, we've also never had more people with mental health problems. And actually, this book as well about the Coddling the American Mind, it talks a lot about the war. I don't know if you remember that part in it, and as well about how, you know, the people who experienced that, my God, you know, they really had problems. Yeah. They knew, so when something upset them after it, they were just sort of rolling their eyes going, well, you know, it can't ever be worse than what I went through before. Now, obviously, no one's suggesting that we want that again, but it just goes to show that perhaps sometimes you need to have a little bit of adversity so that you can actually learn how to deal with stuff that happens, because you'll never stop stuff happening in life. Never, ever, ever. Whatever you do, however much you coddle someone, however much you wrap them in cotton wool, however much you protect them from stuff, you will never stop bad things happening at some point. And what you should do as parents, what we should do as a society, rather than trying to stop bad stuff ever being experienced by anyone, is try and give people the tools and equip them to deal with that bad stuff, because it will happen. Terrible things will happen to you, Connor. Yeah, I know. At some point in your life. Very well said. Suffering is inevitable. It's just how you endure it and how you respond to it, which you can control and which makes you a better person. Yeah. I loathe and I hate it when I put a programme on that I want to watch, and it might upset some people. You know, I've put it on. I want to watch it. Absolutely get it. It's really resonated with people this morning. Connor, thank you. It's nice to have you. Stay safe. Yep. Be careful. Be careful in the door. Yeah, don't trip down the escalator. Don't trip. There's the lifts there as well. Be careful from the doors of the lifts as well. Send me a text. Make sure you got home safely. All right. My mother could do with listening to some of this, honestly. She's like, but she wants a message every time I leave the house. OK, when we come back, we will talk to Dr. Roger Giewald. We're going to talk about how on earth we go forward from some of these economic issues that we have, whether a U-turn is inevitable, and lots more besides. All here live from the Talk Radio studio. This is Talk TV.